validation, admiration, and emotional reactions from others. This is often called supply, and the person who loved them deeply was usually their strongest and most consistent provider of it. The person who gave them everything was the one who defended them when others questioned them, forgave them after every hurtful moment, and kept believing in the version of them that they pretended to be. That kind of loyalty is extremely valuable to a narcissist because it allows them to behave badly without facing real consequences. But when the damage becomes too much and that person begins to emotionally withdraw, the narcissist suddenly feels the shift. The warmth, attention, patience, and emotional energy they once received so easily begins to disappear. Conversations become shorter, reactions become colder, and the constant validation they once depended on is no longer there. For the narcissist, this is deeply unsettling because they were never expecting that source to fade. What makes this even more destabilizing is that narcissists rarely understand genuine emotional connection. They may believe the person will always come back no matter how badly they are treated. So when the person who gave them everything begins to detach, it creates confusion and frustration. They start sensing that something is different, that the emotional access they once had is slipping away, and that the control they relied on is weakening. This loss of supply creates an internal pressure for the narcissist. They may become irritated, restless, or suddenly more attentive, not because they recognize the pain they caused, but because they feel the absence of the emotional energy that once fueled their sense of importance and control. The second thing that happens when a narcissist hurts someone who gave them everything is that the person they once controlled begins to wake up. For a long time, people who are deeply invested in a narcissistic relationship often live in a fog of confusion. They question themselves, they try harder to fix the relationship, and they keep hoping that if they just love more, explain better, or stay more patient, things will finally improve. The narcissist benefits greatly from this confusion because it keeps the other person emotionally hooked and constantly trying to repair something that was never meant to be healthy. But when the hurt becomes too deep, something begins to shift inside that person. The constant cycle of disappointment, manipulation, and emotional exhaustion eventually creates a moment of clarity. They start recognizing patterns they once ignored. They remember the broken promises, the blame shifting, the gaslighting, and the way their kindness was repeatedly used against them. The emotional fog slowly begins to lift. Once this awareness begins, the narcissist starts losing one of their greatest advantages: psychological control. The person who once explained away their behavior now begins to question it. The person who once defended them now begins to step back and observe. Instead of reacting emotionally to every manipulation, they begin responding with distance or silence. That change alone can feel extremely threatening to a narcissist. What makes this awakening so powerful is that it often changes the person's entire perspective. They stop trying to fix the narcissist and start focusing on protecting themselves. Their energy begins to shift away from chasing approval and toward rebuilding their own boundaries. And when that happens, the narcissist senses that the dynamic they relied on is beginning to collapse, because the person who once tolerated everything is no longer seeing them the same way. The third thing that happens when a narcissist hurts someone who gave them everything is that the narcissist experiences what is known as a deep narcissistic injury. Narcissists build their entire identity around a fragile sense of superiority and control. They need to believe they are admired, desired, and irreplaceable. The person who gave them everything often reinforced that illusion for a long time. Their loyalty, patience, and constant attempts to fix the relationship silently told the narcissist, "You are worth fighting for." That message fed the narcissist's ego and strengthened their belief that they could behave however they wanted without losing that person. But when the damage becomes too severe and that loyal person starts pulling away emotionally, it strikes the narcissist at the core of their ego. The idea that someone who once tolerated everything is now stepping back creates a powerful internal wound. It challenges the narcissist's belief that they are always the one in control and that people will never truly leave them. Instead of responding with reflection or accountability, narcissists often react to this injury with anger, blame, or sudden attempts to reassert dominance. They may criticize the person more harshly, accuse them of being ungrateful, or act as if the other person is the problem. This is because admitting they caused the damage would threaten the carefully constructed image they have of themselves. At the same time, the narcissist becomes increasingly unsettled by the loss of emotional control. The person who once reacted strongly to their behavior may now seem calm, distant, or indifferent. That indifference can feel deeply threatening because narcissists rely heavily on emotional reactions to confirm their influence. When those reactions disappear, it creates a psychological shock that forces the narcissist to confront something they try very hard to avoid: the possibility that they are no longer the center of that person's world. The fourth thing that happens when a narcissist hurts someone who gave them everything is that they often begin what is known as hoovering. When the narcissist senses that the person they once controlled is slipping away, they suddenly try to pull that person back into the relationship. This doesn't usually come from genuine remorse or deep understanding of the pain they caused. Instead, it comes from a growing panic that they are losing their most reliable source of emotional supply. Hoovering can appear in many different forms. Sometimes the narcissist becomes unusually kind and attentive, offering apologies, promises to change, or dramatic declarations about how much the person means to them. They may suddenly act like the caring partner, friend, or family member the other person always hoped they would become. To someone who has spent a long time waiting for that version of them to appear, this can feel confusing and emotionally powerful. Other times, hoovering can look very different. Instead of kindness, the narcissist might use guilt, nostalgia, or emotional pressure. They may remind the person of the history they shared, the sacrifices they made, or accuse them of abandoning the relationship. The goal is always the same: to trigger an emotional response strong enough to pull the person back into the cycle. What makes this stage so manipulative is that it often happens right when the other person is finally starting to detach and see the relationship clearly. The narcissist senses the emotional distance and tries to reverse it before it becomes permanent. They may promise therapy, claim they have changed, or suddenly acknowledge problems they denied for years. But the pattern behind hoovering is usually temporary. Once the person returns and the narcissist feels secure again, the old behaviors often reappear. The apologies fade, the promises weaken, and the cycle of control slowly begins again, exactly as it did before. The fifth thing that happens when a narcissist hurts someone who gave them everything is that their carefully protected image begins to crack. Narcissists rely heavily on the way they are perceived by others. They work hard to maintain a certain reputation, someone charming, successful, misunderstood, or even a victim of difficult people. Very often, the person who loved them the most helped protect that image without even realizing it. They defended the narcissist to friends, excused their behavior to family, and kept many painful experiences private in order to preserve the relationship. But when the person who gave them everything finally reaches their breaking point, that silent protection often disappears. They stop covering for the narcissist. They stop explaining away the hurtful behavior. Sometimes they simply withdraw and stop participating in the narrative the narcissist created. Other times, they begin speaking honestly about what really happened behind closed doors. For the narcissist, this can feel extremely threatening because their public image is one of their most important psychological defenses. If people start seeing the cracks in that image, the narcissist risks losing admiration, trust, and influence. Even the possibility of others questioning their behavior can create intense anxiety. In response, narcissists often try to regain control of the story. They may start a smear campaign portraying the person they hurt as unstable, dramatic, or ungrateful. They may twist events to make themselves appear like the one who was wronged. This is not just about revenge, it is about protecting the identity they have carefully constructed. At the same time, the narcissist knows that the person who once protected them now holds the truth about who they really are. And the loss of that silent ally can make them feel exposed in ways they deeply fear. The sixth thing that happens when a narcissist hurts someone who gave them everything is that the power dynamic between them begins to completely flip. For a long time in these relationships, the narcissist usually holds the upper hand. They control the emotional climate, they decide when to give attention and when to withdraw it, and they rely on the other person's patience and loyalty to keep the cycle going. The person who gives everything often spends years trying to earn stability, approval, or genuine care from someone who keeps moving the goalposts. But when that person finally reaches the point where they stop giving, something very significant changes. The emotional energy that once flowed constantly toward the narcissist suddenly dries up. The reassurance, the long conversations trying to fix things, the forgiveness after every painful moment, all of it begins to fade. What replaces it is distance, boundaries, and sometimes complete indifference. For the narcissist, this shift can feel extremely disorienting. They were used to being the one who controlled the pace of the relationship. Now they find themselves reacting to someone else's boundaries. The person who once chased their approval may now seem calm, detached, or uninterested in playing the same emotional games. That loss of influence can be deeply frustrating because narcissists depend heavily on feeling powerful within their relationships. As this shift continues, the narcissist may try several tactics to regain control. They might provoke arguments, create drama, or suddenly show interest again just to trigger an emotional reaction. Any reaction can feel like proof that they still matter. But if the person they hurt remains steady and refuses to return to the old dynamic, the narcissist is forced to face something they rarely experience: life without control over someone who once revolved around them. The seventh thing that happens when a narcissist hurts someone who gave them everything is that they begin to experience a deep sense of emptiness and instability. Narcissists often appear confident, powerful, and emotionally unaffected on the surface, but much of that confidence is built on the attention and emotional energy they receive from others. The person who gave them everything was often the one who consistently filled that emotional gap. Their loyalty, patience, and constant presence created a sense of stability that the narcissist quietly depended on. When that person finally pulls away or emotionally detaches, the narcissist loses more than just a relationship. They lose a steady source of validation that helped regulate their fragile sense of self. Without that constant reassurance, the narcissist can begin to feel restless, irritated, or strangely unsettled. The silence from someone who once cared deeply can feel louder than any argument. What makes this emptiness particularly difficult for narcissists is that they rarely know how to sit with it or understand it. Instead of reflecting on the damage they caused, they often try to escape the discomfort by quickly seeking new sources of attention. This might look like jumping into new relationships, surrounding themselves with people who admire them, or increasing their need for praise and recognition. These new connections are often attempts to replace the emotional supply they lost. However, replacements rarely provide the same level of loyalty and tolerance that the original person offered. The narcissist may notice that new people question them more, challenge them more, or simply refuse to tolerate the same patterns. This can make the absence of the person who once gave them everything feel even more noticeable, even if the narcissist never openly admits it. The eighth thing that happens when a narcissist hurts someone who gave them everything is that they ultimately face the consequences of losing someone who truly cared. Narcissists often act as if the people in their lives are interchangeable, believing that there will always be someone else to give them attention, forgiveness, and emotional supply. But the person who gives everything is rarely replaceable. Their loyalty, patience, and understanding were built over time. And the narcissist often took that for granted, assuming it would always be there no matter how much harm was done. When that person finally sets firm boundaries, walks away, or emotionally detaches, the narcissist is confronted with a reality they seldom anticipate. Their actions have tangible consequences. The loss is not just emotional, it is practical and psychological. They no longer have someone who will tolerate their lies, excuse their behavior, or provide a constant source of admiration. The vacuum left behind is undeniable, and no amount of manipulation or charm can immediately fill it. This stage often forces the narcissist to reflect, consciously or unconsciously, on the choices they made and the patterns they repeated. While they rarely experience true remorse, they feel a mix of frustration, anxiety, and even fear as they realize that their influence over someone they counted on is gone. The absence exposes vulnerabilities they carefully hide, and it shows them the reality that their control is not absolute. In the end, the loss of someone who truly gave everything becomes one of the few moments where a narcissist faces the tangible outcome of their actions. It may not transform them, and they may never fully understand the depth of what they lost, but it is a critical consequence of their behavior, one that underscores the high cost of hurting those who genuinely cared. In conclusion, when a narcissist hurts someone who gave them everything, the impact is far deeper than most people realize. They don't just risk losing a relationship, they lose their source of emotional supply, the loyalty that fed their ego, and the control they so heavily depended on. The person who once forgave, excused, and protected them begins to awaken, setting boundaries and reclaiming their power. This triggers a cascade of consequences: narcissistic injury, hoovering attempts, cracks in their carefully crafted image, flipped power dynamics, a sense of emptiness, and ultimately the unavoidable reality that they have lost someone truly irreplaceable. For the narcissist, these 6 stages are more than just reactions. They are a mirror reflecting the fragility of their identity and the limits of their influence. And for the person who gave everything, this is a moment of liberation, clarity, and self-empowerment. It is proof that no amount of manipulation can hold someone who recognizes their own worth in place forever. The lesson is clear. While narcissists may hurt, manipulate, and take for granted, the one who gives everything has the ultimate power when they choose to protect themselves. Their courage to step back or walk away doesn't just change their life. It exposes the reality that no narcissist can thrive without the very people they underestimate the most. And in that truth lies both freedom and the undeniable consequence of their actions.